Prime Minister Mark Carney sat down with President Trump for their very first face-to-face meeting since this whole tariff war started. And I think this was a very pivotal meeting because it was a repudiation almost from both sides of the previous Prime Minister in Justin Trudeau. But before I get to that, my name is Christopher Balkaran, folks. If you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe. I host the Open Minds podcast where I explore some of the biggest topics with genuine curiosity, talking to people about things that others are afraid to for fear of being canceled. And I do so with an open and honest, genuinely curious mind. So if you're liking this content, hit that like button. Definitely subscribe. I would sincerely appreciate it. Now, Trump has this ability to, when he's speaking with people, he kind of subtly praises them, but then also praises himself at the same time. And he starts the conversation off doing exactly that.
Very much, everybody. It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't say the vote. His party was losing by a lot, and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine.
You see, that's typical Trump. He praises you, but then he also says that he is, in fact, the person you should be talking about. It's kind of like you're just part of the narrative, but he's the narrative. President Trump continues on to talk about a lot of other topics. And at a time when Canadians are on the edge of their seat trying to understand this whole trade war that Donald Trump has ushered in, he spends the next subsequent minutes talking about like the Oval Office renovations, issues with the Houthis, big super tankers turning around in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that take about 10 miles to turn around. I mean, he just covers this wide gamut of different topics when most all Canadians are just trying to figure out what exactly is the president's game plan when it comes to tariffs. And he's also, as of even today, talked about Canada as the 51st state. So very interesting, but very much commonplace for Donald Trump, which is something that Steve Bannon said years ago, and that is to flood the airwaves. You say as much wild stuff as possible that the media actually has a hard time latching on to like what is serious here versus what isn't. But the more you flood the airwaves, the more you get play, the more you get people's eyes on you, the more you get people interested in whatever it is you have to say, even if you don't even know what it is that you're saying. The other thing you have to watch for Trump is that he does make sometimes subtle and not over the top, but subtle digs at a country, at a leader. And as a leader, you have to be careful not to take the bait. I'll play this clip for you, and I'd love to know what you think about it.
There are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway, because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. We have done that in the past. And part of that, as the president just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the president has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO. And that will be part.
Carney does a few things there. He subtly says, of course, Canada's not for sale, and also praises Trump for his refocus back onto military for countries around the world, including their contributions to NATO. Interestingly enough, under Justin Trudeau, Canada's military budgets actually increased more than under the Conservatives under Stephen Harper. That said, military budgets will see a perhaps massive boost from the Carney Liberal government. And I think that does many things. Obviously, it responds to what Donald Trump has asked of Canada and of NATO for sure. But it also does something for the Liberals when it comes to the Conservatives. It insulates them from potential typical playbook strategy by Conservatives, which is you're taking money away from the military towards funding, social programs. I can see Mark Carney not doing that. I can see him being, quote, very conservative in his approach to the military in boosting those budgets and making sure they're well funded. That said, there were moments during the conversation where Mark Carney, he just couldn't get a word in because Donald Trump would just literally, like I said earlier, flood the airwaves. He would flood the airwaves with his own narratives, jumping from topic to topic, that Carney didn't get a word in. And that is Trump's strategy, right? Trump's strategy is to not let others, especially those he disagrees with, even if he respects them, he doesn't need to allow them to get a word in, because if they do get a word in, it takes the emphasis off Donald Trump. And he does not like that. The focus needs to be on Donald Trump. So as you can see, this conversation between Canada and the United States is very much centered on Donald Trump, and he wants to make sure it stays that way. But something else happened during this conversation, which again, I believe is a repudiation of the previous administration here in Canada, doing away with the Trudeau government and some of its cabinet ministers. Hear me out. I know all his cabinet ministers are still going to be in some way, shape, or form part of Mark Carney's inner circle, except potentially one. I'll play this clip and I'll share with you my thoughts.
Sarah, we have the USMCA is a good deal for everybody. I won't say this about Mark, but I didn't like his predecessor. I didn't like a person that worked for. She was terrible, actually. She was a terrible person. And she really hurt that deal very badly because she tried to take advantage of the deal and she didn't get away with it. You know what I'm talking about. But we had a bad relationship having to do with the fact that we disagreed with the way they viewed the deal.
You can't see Mark Carney's face. It's out of shot in this exact video. But when Trump talks about Chrystia Freeland, who's the minister he was referring to, or former minister he's referring to, Mark Carney's face changed. He was very tight-lipped. He did not make a smirk or anything. He understood that the cameras were on, and he purposely did not. He bit his lip, I think, because I'm sure maybe he wanted to say something, but he knew he couldn't. Interestingly enough, Chrystia Freeland wasn't invited as part of Mark Carney's entourage to meet with the president in the Oval Office. Obviously, I think that was done purposely by the prime minister because he knows the reputational risk that she carries. So I'd be interested in the next parliament if Chrystia Freeland holds any ministerial responsibilities at all, because I think Carney is very aware how her name can potentially cause fissures in the relationship that he's trying to rebuild with the president of the United States. So I think overall, Mark Carney did a good job dealing with Donald Trump. As Canadians, we have to recognize that Donald Trump is a megalomaniac. He wants everyone to focus on him. You can't match that energy because he'll just keep outrunning you until you start running in circles behind the guy and start potentially putting your own foot in your mouth as well and causing reputational damage to yourself. And Mark Carney, I think, knows that game. It's just a shame he wasn't a little bit more forceful in getting some rebuttals in. Sometimes it's important to show that strength a little bit more, but he's new out the gate as prime minister and it's first week on the job, so he's probably learning as he goes. But that said, I picked up on some really interesting cues that I saw during this interaction, and I'd love to know what you think about this, because I see, again, as I said from the outset, Mark Carney is the liberal answer. Repudiation, just getting rid, them telling the world, we are not Justin Trudeau. We are not Justin Trudeau's party. And I think Mark Carney is furthering that in his meeting with Trump as he takes a much more moderate, calm stance. Had Trudeau been sitting in that exact seat, I don't think it would have gone the same way. I think Trump would have definitely made Trudeau look very foolish. And Trudeau, because he's very emotional, he might have said things to the president that in his mind would come off as like I'm standing up for Canada. But in reality, he would be putting his foot in his mouth and doing more damage to the relationship. So those are my initial thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This was a very interesting exchange, and I'd be curious to know how this continues from here. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll definitely catch you in the next one.